Lois Lane, #1, written by Greg Rucka, art by Mike Perkins. So this is spinning out of the Superman event called Event Leviathan that is going on right now, and we are getting a Lois Lane solo book. And I have to say, I think it is worth your time. This was a pretty fun read. Greg Rucka is a pretty solid writer, so we got a pretty good team on this book. Let's dive into the story on issue 1, and I'll give you my thoughts as we go through it. So when the book opens up, Lois Lane is in Chicago, and she is working on a story. She's typing on her laptop. I thought it was interesting. Her laptop has like a sticker on it that says, "This machine kills fascists," which is a funny thing for a journalist to have on their laptop. Fight the power, Lois. So she submits her article for publishing. And the maid in her hotel room is talking to her, asking her questions, like if she wants the fridge restocked or whatever. And then the maid makes a joke that, oh, maybe you're going to be having company later. And the maid is referencing what is going on with Lois Lane being caught in the media with a picture of her kissing Superman. And because Lois Lane is actually a very public figure in the DC universe, because she's like an esteemed Pulitzer Prize winning journalist, when she's caught kissing Superman, it's like, whoa, Lois Lane is cheating on her husband Clark Kent, and the whole world is in uproar about it. And Lois Lane kind of tells the maid, like, no, I'm a happily married woman. I'm not going to be kissing Superman. Though, of course, you know, Clark Kent is Superman. So anyway, moving on past this. Perry White then phones Lois, and he's criticizing Lois for her atrocious spelling. Apparently, Lois Lane doesn't know how to turn on spell check on her computer, which I find hard to believe. Also, I would like to think Lois Lane is a pretty good writer and would know how to spell, but apparently she just types so furiously that she misspells a lot. So anyway, they are going back and forth and having a real in-depth editor to writer conversation, talking about sources, talking about, you know, maybe it's dangerous to publish this article. So some like a real interesting sort of journalistic moments here. Perry then tells Lois that there was a Russian reporter lady named Mariska Voronova who has been killed. And she's been killed in that classic Russian sense where, you know, she committed, quote, suicide, where, you know, she like jumped out of her apartment building or whatever. So, you know, it was a suicide that was actually a murder. Lois Lane then goes to meet one of her sources in an underground parking lot, and her source ends up being Renee Montoya, aka one of the 2 characters in the DC universe that is now going by The Question. So you know that superhero, The Question, that sort of investigator with the covered face, the blank face. So Renee Montoya is also another version of The Question in the DC universe. Personally, I don't love the Renee Montoya version of The Question, but nevertheless, that is who Lois Lane's source is. They exchange some sort of information, and then Lois sends The Question to Russia to get some info on that Mariska Voronova person, because Lois was, I guess, friends with this woman, and she knew that this Mariska hid some backups of her information in case she ever did get killed under mysterious circumstances. So Lois sends The Question to go get that information. Lois then heads home, and she's going to spend some quality time with Clark. They spend the night together, and then in the morning they go get breakfast. And as they're walking on the street, Clark hears someone call Lois a slut with his, you know, super hearing. And the person called Lois a slut because of that whole Superman kiss thing, so we're going back to that. And Clark does not like this, and he has a conversation with Lois about this whole situation going on. And Clark says he doesn't like that everyone's calling Lois a slut because of the kiss, but nobody says anything bad about Superman. And Lois says, you know, that is just the sexism double standard and how it works in the world, where the woman is slut-shamed, but the man is, you know, nobody really says anything bad about the man. And I thought this was a very interesting take for Greg Rucka to take on this whole relationship and be able to take something from Bendis's run and sort of expand upon it. So I'm really liking this side plot here. So then we jump over to Moscow, and Renee Montoya, The Question, is there, and she's there to retrieve some documents She has to fight through some street punks to get it, but she does find the documents that Lois Lane sent her to collect. Then we jump back over to America, and we're at, I guess, the White House, and there's a press secretary there named Leanne McCarthy, but she's clearly a parody of Sarah Huckabee Sanders, and she's taking questions, and Lois Lane is there, and she, raises her hand. She throws out some questions about various million-dollar payoffs from LexCorp and various other companies to members of the administration in exchange for contracts, as well as how somehow this all involves the family separations at the border, which is something we see mirrored with the Trump administration and what's going on with their border separations and that whole crisis going on right now. So, very interesting. Greg Rucka sort of tackling these real-world issues and sort of getting his political message out there. So Lois Lane is then kicked out of the press conference by Leanne McCarthy, but the rest of the reporters continue the line of questioning of all these various payoffs and corruption that the administration is all about, and then Lois sort of walks off triumphant, and that is the end of issue 1. So yeah, I thought this was a pretty good debut issue. I thought the artwork was only okay. It's not like my favorite style, but it's definitely passable, definitely acceptable artwork. But yeah, I'm liking the overall story of seeing Lois Lane as this hard-hitting journalist talking about journalistic tropes like deep background, and seeing Lois Lane sort of fight the power, fight the system, going up against a Sarah Huckabee Sanders type, taking down the White House, and sort of tying into the real life Trump administration and sort of tackling some of those issues. So I thought this was pretty interesting stuff. This is a pretty sort of adult, serious comic, not your typical superhero fare. And I'm definitely excited to follow this series. I'm going to give this opening issue a 8.5 out of 10.